Today, we're reviewing the movie Glass, M. Night Shyamalan's latest film. I'll say up front, this was basically a mixed bag of a movie. I don't think it was great, I don't think it was bad. I will say that I'm surprised by the Rotten Tomatoes score for this film. It's sitting at about a 36% right now. Personally, I would have expected that to be close to double that score. There's a couple things that stand out that make this a good movie, and then a couple things that kind of drag it down, which prevent it from getting a higher score. Personally, if I were to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably put it close to a 6. The couple of things that stand out as positive aspects of this film, number one is the mystery and intrigue. That's the thing M. Night Shyamalan is known for, that's what he does best, and it's fully on display here. The movie's about 2 hours long, and I'd say for about 2/3 of that runtime, I found myself intrigued by the mysteries, by the questions the movie was putting out there, on the edge of my seat, curious to see what happens next. I said for about 2/3 of the movie I felt that way. We'll talk about that other third when I describe some of the things that didn't work so well for this movie. So, number one, the mystery and intrigue. Number two, the performances, at least in a couple of isolated cases, worked really well. Number one, James McAvoy. If you saw the movie Split, then you know his character displays many personalities. And oftentimes in this movie, we'll see the actor switch from one personality to another all in one take. So you see his expression change, you see his voice and his performance totally change from one moment to the next. And no matter how many times I saw it in the movie, I was amazed every time. That alone makes this movie worth seeing to some degree. Samuel L. Jackson also does a good job in this movie. And the rest of the characters, again, we'll talk about that when we discuss what didn't work so well. One more positive thing I'll say about this movie, you can call this positive thing number 2.5, because I don't think it necessarily contributed a lot to the movie, to the movie's quality, but it is something interesting about it. And that's, if you liked Unbreakable, it's very cool to see M. Night Shyamalan come back and make this sequel, a sequel that I personally never expected to see, and then just seeing some of the familiar elements that he brought back to the screen, including David Dunn's son, played by Spencer Treat Clark. Seeing that same actor, you saw him as a kid almost 20 years ago, seeing him come back, seeing how his character's progressed, and giving him a pretty decent amount to do in this movie, really cool to see, and just gives you a little bit more enjoyment of this film if you were a fan of Unbreakable. And now the things that didn't work so well in this movie. There's really two main things I would point out that drag this movie down a little bit, but both of them can be summed up in one word, and that's unsatisfying. I mentioned earlier that the movie asks a lot of interesting questions. It puts a lot of interesting concepts out there, but without getting into spoilers, I'll say that I walked out of the theater somewhat disappointed with how many of those questions were handled. Not all of them. Some of them have interesting answers, but not all of them. And for the ones that didn't work as well, it's hard to say whether it's the concept that was a problem or the execution. But regardless, whether the ideas work or not on paper, the execution in the film just didn't work for me. The other aspect of this movie, which I found to be pretty unsatisfying, I mentioned earlier that there were a couple of standout performances in this film, especially James McAvoy, followed closely by Samuel L. Jackson. But for the rest of the characters, I can pretty much say there's not a whole lot there on the table. And it's not the fault of the actors or actresses, but just the fact that they weren't given a whole lot to do compared to James McAvoy. This is especially disappointing with the David Dunn character played by Bruce Willis. Again, I don't think Bruce Willis did a bad job. It's not like he's phoning it in or anything. He just wasn't given a lot to do. His arc in the movie is supremely unsatisfying, and I would say that that's extra true if you were a fan of Unbreakable, because then it's not just 2 hours of anticipation and seeing the conclusion. It's about 20 years that you're waiting to see this character again, and it's cool to see him. There's a couple of interesting things there, but overall I thought his arc in the movie was pretty unsatisfying. So bottom line, the movie's sort of a mixed bag. If you're wondering whether or not M. Night Shyamalan can still deliver the goods, I think this movie clearly answers he can, because the mystery and the intrigue are there. The movie was entertaining most of the time, but I'd really like to see him stick the landing next time and give us a satisfying conclusion. Now, there were a few aspects where it felt like he was held back somewhat by the budget, and that's partially what made it less satisfying, but I don't think that's entirely the case, and we've seen him do a great job with a lower budget. So I'm looking forward to the next thing he does, whatever it is. I doubt we'll see more from this universe in the future. Not that they couldn't, but M. Night Shyamalan's pretty much expressed that he doesn't want to do that. So whatever he does next, I'm interested to see it. I just hope he sticks the landing a little bit better next time around.